In part 2 of our series of videos looking at the options around exporting and reading SurveyMonkey data for analysis in SPSS, we're going to be looking at our first example here where we're going to be exporting the data as an Excel file, and more crucially the actual cell data itself is going to be represented using the actual answer text. We want to see what the implications are of that when it comes to analysis in SPSS. So these are the options we're choosing in the export survey data dialog. You can see here we're choosing XLS. Current view is fine, you can stick with that. We've got no filters switched on, and we're happy just to export the data using either current view or original view. It'll make no difference in this occasion. Condensed is the column format that we've chosen here. That's the default, and we recommend that you stick to that for analysis in SPSS. Crucially, the cell data is going to be represented using actual answer text. And lastly, we're giving it a file name here called condensed actual answer text, just so we can tell what file refers to what set of options. Now, before we go any further, let's just look at the two options here around condensed and expanded columns. This is what a condensed column looks like, or a condensed variable looks like, which is exactly how we'd expect it to be represented in SPSS. We've got a single response variable saying which industry sector best describes your main area of work. If, however, we chose the other format, if we chose expanded, it would split these responses as if it was a multiple response question across separate columns. That's not really what we would expect for that type of question when we're analyzing in SPSS, and therefore the condensed option is the one we should really stick to. When we export the data itself, it is exported as a zipped file, so it's an archive file. And when we unarchive it, when we extract it, we'll see that there are actually 3 different files inside. 2 of them are system files, the collector list and the page order. Not very interesting for us. The file that we're interested in is the largest one, which is the actual survey data itself. Here the survey is called the analytics survey. So let's take a look at how we read and analyze that in SPSS. So I think the first piece of advice we would give people is to actually inspect the file that's been downloaded before you read it into SPSS. So if I double click on this file, we'll be able to see it in Excel and be able to, inspect how SurveyMonkey has chosen to export it. And what we notice is that we've got the field names across the top here, which is kind of what we'd expect and certainly what SPSS would expect. So if I just auto fit that, you can see here's the field names. That all looks fine. Are you based in the UK? You indicated you're based outside the UK. Whereabouts? How recently did you use software for analyzing data? These are our kind of primary questions. Of course, some of these fields we may just delete them. We don't really need them for analysis purposes. But we also notice we've got the second row here. And SPSS doesn't expect there to be a second row referring to the field names or additional metadata as there is in there. So we can see that here initially, it just looks like the second row indicates whether or not this is a single response question or whether it's an open-ended response question. You might think, well, I'll just delete that, and then, that's just going to mess up SPSS. I'll just delete that row of data and it'll be fine. That would work in a lot of occasions, but there is one snag with it, and the snag is a multiple response question. So we have a multiple response question here where people can tick all that apply, and the question is, what kind of analytical software do you regularly use? Please choose all that apply. And instead of it saying, this is a multiple response question, it actually shows me what the response is for that category. So commercial paid for specialist analytical software such as SAS or SPSS, or commercial paid for BI visualization software such as Cognos or Tableau, and so forth. But notice above here, the first column would have the actual question itself. The second column is blank. So that means that when we read that into SPSS as it is at the moment, if we just deleted that row, that would call that column V1. And the next one for variable 1, the next one would be V2, variable 2. So they wouldn't have column names, they wouldn't have variable names. An easy way to do with that is you could possibly just rename these into software 1, software 2, software 3, and still delete this row, and then you'd be fine. But it's just a gotcha. You just got to be aware of that. Go in with your eyes open and be aware that when it comes to these multiple response questions, this second row actually shows the response item rather than just the type of field it is. Now in this case I'm going to delete it. I'm going to delete, and I'm going to fix this stuff later on. So I'm just going to read it as it is. You'll see it come in at this point. So if I just highlight this and hit delete and then save the file, I'll just read the file as it's been saved like this, raw into SPSS, and then show you some of the challenges we might have with regard to formatting the data and getting it set up for analysis. So here in SPSS statistics, we can begin the process of reading in that file we've just edited a little bit by going to File and then down to Import Data and then Excel. If we navigate towards it, you can see here it's been placed, once we've extracted it, it places it in the folder called Condensed Actual Answer Text, which is what our export file was called, and then it creates a subfolder called Excel. And there's our 3 files, 2 of which are system files. We're not really interested in that. We're only interested in this one, the analytics survey. If I click open at that point, it will begin the process of reading that in using this little dialog box here, where it automatically detects where the data starts. It assumes that the first row represents the variable names in the data, and if there's any hidden leading spaces from string values or trailing spaces, you can remove them if you want. Basically now if I click OK at that point, it goes off and reads the file, comes back to me, and if I don't like, or I don't need some of these fields which are empty for me, I don't really require them, I could say, okay, well look, let's just delete those. I can start to set it up. You'll remember this issue that we had with the multiple response variables. Here are the field names. Some of them are quite long. I could actually go through and rename some of these field names. Let me do that. So as you can see here, I've spent some time renaming the fields as I want them, and I've also attached some meaningful variable labels to the fields, so it's just easier to understand what each one refers to. That's taken a bit of investment time. But the real issue here is that we have exported this data using the cells as actual answer text format. That was the format, that was the option that we chose when we exported. An actual answer text means that instead of the values being exported as codes, as numbers with labels attached to them, as we often have with SPSS files, the values have been exported as actual text. And the big downside to that is that, first of all, it limits you with regard to the type of analysis you can do. You certainly can't do a correlation with string values or string variables. And when you do a simple analysis like a frequency table, it's going to list the values in alphabetical order. And this is usually a real problem with an ordinal field. This is actually an ordinal field where we said, when did you last use the software? And we hit descriptive statistics here. And we can see that it's showing it as I don't know is the first answer, and then I don't use software for data analysis. And it says more than a year ago, then within the last 3 months, then within the last 7 days, and then within the last month, and then within the last year. So the order is nonsensical. It hasn't preserved the order, and this is one of the big downsides to exporting the data as string, effectively actual answers as text. And it's not an option which I would recommend for those reasons. If you wanted to fix this and you do have data like that, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to use a recode procedure. So you have to go to transform here, and there's different ways in which you can do it. You can use automatic recode or recode into different variables, but basically you've got to overwrite these string descriptions with numbers. Then you've got to turn the field into a numeric field by changing the type to numeric, and then you've got to attach value labels to those numbers, which are the original description. So it can take a lot of work if you're working from scratch with a file of this nature when you're exported in this way. Let's return to the next section, however, and look at the effect of exporting the data where we just have numerical data, numerical values rather than the actual answer text.